here?
In the ramen.
Should have said anything but us said it.
Bang, okay?
Now I regret saying.
Stop talking.
I'm a demon too.
Just like old times.
Shut up!
You put us in harm's way. You got us grounded.
What's that, brother?
I'm an angry with 2 needlers.
You have no idea what I can do.
Anyone claim responsibility, sir?
Oni thinks it's Paramount and Showtime. Almost 2 years ago, they pulled a similar job with Season 1. Debauched the Master Chief and threw out all the established law. That cannot happen here. Reach is too damned important. I want that review ready to go, Noble One.
Sir, consider it done.
Then I'll see you on the other side. Holland out.
May God help us all.
G'day. Sorry to keep you waiting. After reviewing episode 4, I had a bit of a crisis of faith and considered leaving the Silver Timeline review where it belonged, ignored and in the garbage. Watching this show as a long-time Halo fan is something between tedium and torture, depending on how badly the episode is respectfully touching on the law, quote unquote. And to be honest, the level of normie interest in the show plummeted after episode 5, or as I like to call it, episode 5 The Return of Filler, with only the most loyal of Silver Timeline cope artists remaining to praise the season finale. So the juice really didn't feel worth the squeeze, particularly given the pain I would have to put myself through just to watch the damn thing. That said, several Sheltered Harbour sub-captains have stood firm in the face of Paramount's assault on Halo while I went MIA. And it would go against Halo's DNA to abandon those skippers in their hour of need, leaving the fight unfinished. So,
Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
following a near-death experience with the sea turtle while I did some soul-searching in the open ocean, I now have a new lease on life. So this time around, I will actually abstain from whinging about me law and focus on the Silver Timeline in earnest. Yeah, I know I've said it before, and I can't help that my passion gets the better of me sometimes. So for the review of the remainder of the season, we'll recap the plot with a generous sprinkle of salt, discuss the positives and what fell short. We'll also touch on some of the interesting meta surrounding the show and see if we can't pinpoint why Season 2 still isn't the faithful adaptation many Halo fans were hoping for. I will of course draw comparisons between the Silver Timeline and core canon, because comparative moments of the two is one of the better ways to illustrate quality. But I will not descend into an impassioned rant about why the core timeline is and always will be superior. That said, there seems to be no middle ground with the Silver Timeline in terms of the current reviews. People either hate it or rate it. I personally fall with the former, but to each their own. From professional critics calling it a masterclass, to fans, quote-unquote, crying out for a Season 3, through to the one-star reviews and coal-face reaction channels calling it an absolute disgrace from what came before. Although there is a bit of skew, at least on Rotten Tomatoes, as the 4 to 5 star reviews normally consist of "it's better than Season 1, 5 stars. And while I agree that Season 2 is better than Season 1 in most instances, it's hardly worthy of a 4 or 5 star review. This is a classic case of modern day extremism. I like it, therefore it's perfect, and I hate it, therefore it burned my house. Because to give ground on any side of the extreme is a sign of weakness that will undoubtedly be exploited by the other side. It's also reflective of how fickle the modern consumer can be, on both sides of the spectrum. But here in the Sheltered Harbour, we believe in a little bit more nuance. And when both Forbes and the Games Radar are calling it as they see it instead of towing the party line of praise be Hollywood, you know the truth lies somewhere in between the two poles. I'm not going to do a deep dive on this one, guys, because even wading into the shallow waters of this show makes me sad. So instead, I'm just going to hit the wave tops. But don't worry, Skipper, shit rises to the surface, so there will be plenty to talk about regardless. So grab that salt shaker, mate, we're going to get right into it. Following episode 4, Chief and the survivors of the Battle of Reach, which lasted about 45 minutes, Can someone please check on that copy-paster from my last review and check that they're okay? I imagine they've taken the news pretty hard that episode 4 was, indeed, all the reach they are going to get. Escape the planet, bruised, battered, but alive. Well, at least most of them. Rest in peace, the closest thing this show had to a canon-accurate Spartan. Episode 5 is 100% filler that takes place in a location that is so generic it may as well be called Western Space Ranches in Space. The pacing is terrible and makes the 1 hour episode feel like 2. And despite the luxury of time, very little actually happens. Basically, the plot is John comes to terms with the death of Vanek, vowing revenge against the elite that killed him, and Oni for abandoning them on Reach. Quan rediscovers her connection with the Space Witches from Season 1, because why else would she still be here? Soren and his wife go looking for their son Kessler, and she changes her hair for some reason. And Riz then decides to give up on being a Spartan in pursuit of a normal life. Because the galaxy-wide war for survival of the human race is a war of choice, don't you know? And you can just abandon your friends, duty, and species in pursuit of that normal life because the genocidal covenant hell-bent on the destruction of humanity won't burn your world if you're a peaceful bystander. And there won't be any repercussions for abandoning the UNSC as a military professional. I'm going to call it as I see it. Riz's subplot in Season 2 is stupid, and she would have been better served dying in Season 1 at the Temple of Covenant on the planet of Covenant in order to save Silver Team. Her little romp down I want a normal life lane was merely a vehicle to shoehorn in diverse and inclusive minority characters into a story that didn't need them and is already suffering from character bloat. And in terms of the story, makes as much sense as Quan's rebellion in Season 1. None of these feelings matter if the Covenant win, because they'll burn every human world if no one fights back. Or is that my projection at this point, because the show still hasn't really defined why the Covenant is at war with the humans? A point the showrunners seem to have completely missed, unaware of the irony of Madrigal being glassed at the start of the season, literally making Quan's subplot in Season 1 irrelevant because now the Space Witches can apparently find her on any planet at any time for any reason. So there was no need for her to go back to Madrigal and discover the wishing well with the monitor in it. Both Riz and Quan's character subplots, apart from being morally selfish and clearly written by people that have never experienced hardship before, are both absolute time leeches, and ultimately amount to 2 parts of stuff all when feeding the main plot, apart from a contrived end goal of leaving John on his own at the end of the season, but we'll get to that. Mercifully, episode 6 is only 50 minutes long and its comparative pacing is better. The episode also has some scenes that actually approach looking, feeling, and even sounding like Halo. Apart from the absolute stretch of faith and logic it takes to believe that soldiers like Perez, who was seen in the first 4 episodes as scared, weak, and less than effective in combat, becoming, I'm guessing, what are supposed to be Spartan 3 equivalents, in the same length of time it took John to escape Reach, bury Vanek, and then head to Onyx, which in the show is about a week. On Onyx, however, it's revealed that Kai has been training the next generation of Spartans under the guidance of Akison, whom, shock horror, has been working for Parangoski this entire time, who, as it turns out, also ordered the retreat of Reach. Unfortunately, Akison has taken an absolute nosedive in competence between episode 3 and now, allowing John, Soren, Halsey and Quan to make landfall on Onyx, the top secret planet where all this is taking place, and where, coincidentally, all their plot goals intersect. Wow, how very convenient. So convenient, in fact, it turns out that Quan's connection to the witches is actually connected to the ancient artifacts that Halsey's super nerd daughter has been researching. Wow, she's back, yay! And fortunately, Halsey knows where to look for these because she also began this research on Onyx, where apparently she found links with ancient DNA that helped recruit the Spartans. And Kessler is being held here too for some reason. John then does his best Jason Bourne impersonation, only to be captured by conventionally armed ONI soldiers wielding MP7s, rather than the iconic M7 submachine gun. Interesting. While all this is happening, Cortana, whom has been captured by the Covenant, I forgot to mention that in my last review because I was so mad that I basically forgot to review episode 4, is helping McKee to find Halo because McKee has lost her Keystone mojo after she died in Season 1. Did the show ever explain how McKee survived? No? Okay, just checking. Anyway, as it turns out, Cortana being captured was all part of Parangosky's 4D chess plan. She allowed this so that she could use Cortana to help the UNSC find and destroy the Covenant fleet. Never mind the tremendous risk posed of losing an AI with intimate knowledge of the UNSC, ONI and the Spartan program to the Covenant. Although, if this was the plan, why did Cortana not ID the location of High Charity when her ship was on approach? Surely the Holy City is a much higher value target than the Covenant fleet. Regardless, McKee's presence on the Covenant ship finally pushes some of the more zealot elites to breaking point and a fight breaks out, with the Arbiter protecting McKee for promise of finding the Halo, and bringing him unparalleled glory. Fortunately, John has broken out of captivity with the aid of Cortana, because time, space and proximity mean nothing in science fiction, and has found the other keystone. Naturally, both parties are proximate to the keystone at the same time. Geez, that was lucky. Which restores McKee's ability to use the object and teleport them both to the ring between rings. Here, the two characters have another patented silver timeline discussion about the morality of war, what it means to be human, and how McKee, despite still loving Jimmy's cheeks, is still a true believer, even though she abandoned her faith at the end of Season 1 and was merely a tool of the prophets. And they both decide that neither party can have the ring. Well, this technically happens at the start of Episode 7 following the Keystone cliffhanger, but you get the idea. Episode 7, shorter again at 45 minutes, is death by exposition, as if trying to get all the telling out of the way to enable the action that's coming in the season finale. It is quite a shame that it is literally impossible to do exposition, character development and action all at the same time, hey? The episode opens with McKee confirming the location of Halo and the UNSC confirming the location of the Covenant fleet en route to said Halo. Parangosky then decides to send the Spartan 3s, yes, Spartan 3s confirmed, to assault the fleet. In small waves, without fire support, and not en masse, which leads to Group 1 getting decimated before even getting close to the fleet. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, Parangosky was tactically inept in Season 1 also, but my god. The whole point of allowing Cortana to get captured was to ID the Covenant fleet to enable a surprise attack, with the goal of getting the Spartan 3s and their super stick of destruction on board one of the vessels in order to deliver a virus to disable the Covenant fleet. By my assessment, this is a one-shot tactic, everything or nothing. This means logically you would wait till the UNSC fleet was in position to support, giving the Spartan 3s every chance of making it aboard one of the vessels. You'd also send them all at once, with a commander's reserve of course, because the more you send, the more likely one group is to make it through. All sending one group at a time does is give the game away and get soldiers killed. I know this scene is meant to show Parangosky's malice and contempt for the life of the Spartans, but in reality it just paints her as an incompetent moron who would never be allowed command of combat units, particularly elite soldiers as these Spartan 3s are meant to be in the show. Anyway, while this is happening, John and Kai have buried the hatchet. Alright, I forgot to mention, they had a big fight and she was in her armour and beat the shit out of him, but she couldn't bring herself to kill him. Unfortunate. And now they're searching for John's suit. Naturally, Kai apologises for ditching Silver Team in favour of training the Spartan 3s, only to have John lecture her about making the wrong choice and blah blah hypocrisy. It's okay when I disobey orders but not when you do it, blah blah blah. Eventually, they find Ackerson, who's had a crisis of faith in Parangosky's leadership, shock horror, and realise that her plan is not to deliver a virus, but rather to overload a single ship's reactor that will cause an explosion powerful enough to wipe out half the system. Because one single Covenant reactor exploding is more powerful than any of their actual weapons combined, for some reason. This will in turn kill all the Spartan 3s, and for some reason, cold calculated Ackerson, the same man that killed his father and cloned his sister to have her die repeatedly, is sad about this. Why can't modern writers be consistent? Because of this, Ackerson helps John to get his armour back, leading to this inadvertently loaded line of dialogue.
I'll be destroyed too. It all costs something. Even when you can't see it. That's what you people never understand. Somebody always pays. This time it's you.
Oh, buddy, I have so much to say about that, but we'll come back to this later. John then commandeers a Condor and decides to go after McKee to stop her and the Arbiter, who's more or less a tag-along for the rest of the show, from getting control of Halo. Not because he was ordered to do so, but simply because the plot demands it now because his infighting with the chain of command has run its course. At least for now. Naturally, Parangoski is unhappy that Ackerson has helped John and she orders him under arrest. And then this dickhead looks straight at the camera. For God's sake. The episode ends with McKee and Pet, and now John, en route to Halo, and Kai and the Spartan Threes inbound to assault the Covenant fleet. Oh wait, concurrent to all of this, Halsey, Supernerd and Quan activate an ancient antechamber and retrieve some sort of biological sample from a dead alien. Evidently, this is meant to be a forerunner in terms of the core lore, but in the Silver lore, it's just a dead alien that looks vaguely human. Concurrently to this, Soren and his wife find Kessler, who is undergoing Spartan training apparently. Soren then beats the crap out of the people holding his son hostage, only to have Lyra and Kessler captured. Soren is then once again left alone. As you may have gathered, there are too many characters with too many subplots that distract from the main plot, it's hard to even summarise. The finale opens with John being interviewed by someone off screen. Spoilers, it's a monitor. And the monitor is having a cryptic discussion about the dark thing that John found. Geez, I wonder what this could be foreshadowing. The episode is then effectively broken into 3 parts, 2 that intersect and 1 that ties into the monitor's monologue. The first follows the biological sample that infects the show's quota of diversity-hired scientists and leads to a generic zombie outbreak. Way to stick to your strengths, Wiener. The second is the Spartan 3 assault on the Covenant fleet, and naturally John gets involved because his little insubordinate protege gave him a speech about a coin. And the third is John making Ringfall and fighting the Arbiter. The zombie plot is pretty by the numbers. Slowly but surely, scientists working with the sample, except for Super Nerd, whose plot armor is intact from Season 1, slowly get infected and start turning violent. Naturally, Soren needs to venture into the infected facility to find his wife and son, and of course, Quan goes with him. Oh look, another modern day conventional weapon. Fortunately, his wife and son are being held alongside Ackerson, who has extensive knowledge of the facility and how to escape. So after Soren shoots his way through the first of many zombies, they break the prisoners out and attempt to escape. This is where we learn, through Quan's bullshit witch magic, that these creatures are the Flood. No points for any long-standing Halo fans watching the show, but for newcomers, this might be confusing or it might be helpful, I don't know. But the show decides to dump this information during the escape, literally pausing time to do so, rather than having the Halo monitor explain it. You know, because all this is happening retroactively to the conversation John is having currently. But whatever. The team makes it out, but Lyra has been bitten, so in typical zombie cliché fashion, she decides to lock the door behind the team to ensure that they escape, trapping herself inside for good measure. This annoyed me, because in the core lore Flood pod infectors attach themselves to their victims and burrow into their spinal cord, which leads to conversion. This makes them very different from run-of-the-mill zombies. While the infected form is still a threat, the real body horror of the Flood comes from the pod infector forms and the carrier forms. Sure, in the lore there are references to Flood spores, but they don't cause their victims to become zombified, so to speak. They essentially mutate their host into a pod producer, breaking down and eating the nutrients of the body in order to produce pod infection forms which actually spread the Flood. This makes them very different to run-of-the-mill zombies. In the Silver timeline, the Flood initially infects through airborne spores, a bit like in The Last of Us, and then infect through biting, like in Resident Evil. Actually, this whole segment looks like the 2002 Resident Evil movie, right down to the underground laboratory. Well, I guess that's super appropriate given that both are terrible adaptations of their source material, but in the case of this show and The Flood, it's just another thing that the show has failed to adapt correctly. Yeah, it was reasonably well done, but so it should be given the showrunner's work on The Walking Dead. Oh, and Halsey also gets infected, but Super Nerd puts her on ice and promises to find a cure. Bloody hell, we should really start playing cliché bingo with this show.
Halsey!
We have to go! Halsey!
Come on! Come on, let's go! Mom! Please!
Junior, give me your other hand. I can't hold on.
I can get it. I can almost reach it, Dad.
Indiana?
Indiana? Let it go.
Plot 2 goes about as well as Episode 7 indicated that it would. Only a small group of Spartan 3s make it aboard one of the Covenant ships. This group includes Perez and Kai, only to get whittled down by Covenant infantry. And if I'm being super generous, I would say that the action here was solid. The Covenant very much acted like the Covenant, and while the Silver Timeline Spartan 3s make no sense in terms of the timeline, it was cool to watch them fight. And watching the Covenant lasers carve up the incoming UNSC fleet, leaving the 3s stuck without resupply, felt right at home in a Halo show. It's just the shame that the whole scene was undercut by more of John's insubordination from being insubordinate on a non-directed mission by the chain of command that they suddenly deemed the highest priority, only to have him magically appear on the ship in what should have been the coolest reveal Halo fans have ever seen, once again to fight elites with an aversion to plasma rifles. While all this is happening, McKee decides she doesn't need Cortana anymore now that she's found Halo and stomps on her with her Covenant leather heels. Perhaps Weena has a heels fetish. John then orders all remaining Spartans to evacuate the ship while Kai does what needs to be done, and Superman's through space to catch McKee's ship, which is now about to crash into the Halo because her and the Arbiter ditched it, because he needs to save Cortana, because apparently he can't live without her now despite completely disliking her in Season 1, only reluctantly allowing her to control his body at the end of the season, which basically killed him, and having no on-screen development between the two characters this season.
You wouldn't understand.
That's because this relationship is reminiscent of the one in the games, which the show hasn't built up or earned. So there's nothing to understand. It doesn't make any sense, it doesn't have any emotional impact, and it's just another case of John going off mission. Although I do love that everyone keeps saying John has a mission, like they were the ones that issued it to him.
You know your mission. Secure the ring, defend it.
No, he was taken off the duty roster, left for dead, and then imprisoned. He then broke out of that prison, assaulting various UNSC officials along the way, only to steal a ship and go rogue once again. At this point in the story, he is technically a criminal of the UNSC, or at best, AWOL. But it's a good thing Season 2 sort of cares about the Covenant threat, otherwise they might have sent a whole fleet to arrest him. Actually, that would explain why the UNSC fleet arrives after John steals the Condor, rather than arriving when the Spartan 3's assault commenced. My god, even at a glance this plot is a bloody mess. Anyway, John finds Cortana, who was hiding in the ship's systems all along, and downloads her by punching a Covenant console. I'm not sure how that works, but anyway, just in time to crash into the Halo. While this is happening, Kai does her best Admiral Holdo impersonation and rams the Covenant capital ship with her vessel, apparently killing herself and leaving John a lone Spartan. Wow, just like in the games. Fortunately, John teleports away from his crash ship and awakens on the shores of Halo. And despite being on a foreign world without a tested atmosphere, he immediately takes his helmet off. I had to get 1 second to last jab in there. I know no one really has the energy to care about the whole helmet thing anymore. He then finds McKee, fights and loses to the Arbiter, who for some reason doesn't kill him on the spot, only to go for round 2 and kill the Arbiter. R.I.P. Chad Vadamy, at least we'll always have the memes. Then, despite McKee saying that she plans to wipe the galaxy clean and end all war by using the Halo, and having both the strength, speed and means in which to stop her, John lets her walk away. The season ends with more monitor monologuing about the thing in the dark, and then John puts his helmet on, which is broken. Yay, now we get to see Pablo's face even when he wears the helmet. The screen then cuts to black as the iconic Halo music plays. In terms of action, the finale does quite a bit right in terms of the assault on the Covenant fleet, as it feels like something that could actually belong in Halo. John has an entire fight where he keeps his armor and helmet on, and the showrunner seemingly has the guts to kill off at least a couple of main characters. Assuming they don't pull another fast one if they get a Season 3 and bring them back without any real explanation. But, much like Season 1 and the rest of the season, the writers can't help getting in their own way with all the side pish. Honestly, at least once an episode there is a lecture about what it means to be human, and it gets very tedious. Yeah, I get it, the Silver Timeline is about John, not the Master Chief, and he is a big boy with big feelings, but there is a way to show that rather than beating the audience over the head with dialogue.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost.
They say that, like, soldiers and humanity are two different things. I mean, soldiers aren't machines. We're just people. let you have the deck to yourself.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
Message received, feelings felt. Well done. Don't get me wrong, there were parts that I actually didn't mind. John's disassociation to the death of Vanek and his eventual acceptance of a loss of a friend versus a casualty isn't bad stuff, but it gets lost amongst the other lectures from all the various meat puppets playing out the hang-ups of the writers who evidently hate war and the military and the idea of following orders. On that note, I think I've identified what may be the biggest problem with the show. You know, apart from all the cosmetic problems and going rogue from the core lore. And it's this weird aversion the showrunners seem to have about painting the UNSC in any positive light. Because for the most part, the only time the characters are making the morally correct decision, they are usually doing so in contradiction to their orders from the UNSC. And the scenes we have of the UNSC decision makers are often plagued with infighting, hubris, and a casual indifference to the soldiers who are meant to be fighting a war for the survival of the human race. This is 100% a trend that began with 343 in Halo 4, and I will do a future deep dive on the topic because I believe it deserves more attention. But for now, in terms of the Silver timeline, at least for me, this is the primary reason why the show doesn't feel like Halo, because it's almost apologising for wanting to be part of the UNSC. Whereas in the first 5 Halo games under Bungie, being 1 to 3, Reach and ODST, the UNSC were definitely depicted as the objective good guy, and the protagonist of the stories, at least in the games, were a soldier in that good fight. But as I said, I will discuss this further in a future video. Regardless, because of this apologist approach to the military element of Halo, the show focuses on all the wrong things. And to illustrate that point, I want to pull your attention towards episode 5. The episode takes place on a relatively barren planet with these big silos in the background. Aesthetically, very science fiction-y. But what do they choose to put inside one of those big interesting silos? A little cottage with a lesbian couple who wants to adopt an interracial child, which ultimately means nothing to the main plot or the subplot, as the child in question is not at this particular silo. I bring this up because the last time we saw a silo of this nature in a live-action Halo, it looked something like this.
A military cemetery was created inside the cooling tower of an active nuclear power plant. Bungie, Halo's developer, collaborated with the Academy Award-winning costume designer from Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers to design a Halo-style honor guard uniform, complete with special insignias and rank displays.
Imagine filming on such an interesting set and/or location and underutilizing it in the sense of the very show that you're meant to be producing. In the year 2552, Halo is meant to be about the Human Covenant War, which I am positive the showrunners were aware of, otherwise they wouldn't have set the show in that particular year. But I guess to show the Human Covenant War, you would need to depict the UNSC as fighting the bad guys, and the show is so adverse to doing that, this is what we end up with. The closest thing we get is a B-grade comparison of the Spartan 3s fighting the Covenant. I say B-grade because once again, we've seen Spartan 3s fighting the Covenant before and it looked something like this. When a multi-million-dollar show can't clear a benchmark set 15 years ago by 3 live-action trailers with relatively low budgets, need I say more? But I guess that's an appropriate segue to talk about that loaded piece of dialogue I mentioned earlier.
It all costs something, even when you can't see it. That's what you people never understand. Somebody always pays. This time it's you.
These words are more true than Paramount could possibly imagine, because despite the show being branded the Silver Timeline, it has 100% poisoned the well for any future live-action Halo adaptations. This show is now the precedent and unfortunately the inadvertent benchmark for anything that comes next. And for some unlucky folk, their only exposure to Halo as a franchise, which means fans could continue to get low-effort, canon-inaccurate Halo, but so long as it's better than the first and second season of this show, will be an improvement, and likely accepted by this mythical and non-existent modern audience. I guess Microsoft only really have themselves to blame when it comes to this show, given how tightly they held on to creative control in the first instance, which ultimately ruined any chances of a Halo movie. But did we have to go from holding on too tight to not holding on at all and letting the franchise fall off a cliff like this? So to wrap this up, yes, Halo Season 2 is better than Halo Season 1, but that wasn't exactly a high bar to clear. Will it get a Season 3? Well, I bloody hope not. But apparently the Latin American community has thoroughly embraced the show. I guess that's because the Silver Timeline's got more in common with a telenovela than it does with anything Halo. Either that or all the bots on Instagram just happen to be Latin American.
Para el traducir para mí.
Regardless, the grubby corporate committee creation fingerprints are all over Halo Season 2. Box ticking at the expense of good storytelling while fundamentally failing to adapt the source material. Boy, am I glad the writers shed the constraints of the canon, because I have no idea how they'd fill those Microsoft diversity quotas if they were focused on good storytelling. But remember, I'm just a brainless lump who hopes never to see Pablo's face inside the Master Chief's helmet ever again. Uru, mate.